screen. Now, I've gone over a bit of the background. When you first sign in, this is what you'll see. So you have the main search bar at the top of the screen. Now on the left-hand side on this black panel, there's a settings section, and within settings there are two options. Now, one here is called the source link. Now, as I mentioned, we search across multiple different services on JustisOne. In this section, you can say to JustisOne what you do have access to and what you don't have access to. And that just makes the process of using JustisOne to find resources on other platforms a bit more seamless. The service will know what you do have access to and what you don't. And obviously, there's a button here for free services. We link to about 30 different free services, because if something is available somewhere online for free, then you want to know about it. There's no point paying for something that you can get freely elsewhere. So if it is available for free, we will point you in that direction, because obviously we want to be making the most of these services that are available. So I do recommend, especially if you're the administrator of your account, come into this section. You can tell the service what you have, and it just makes the research process a bit more seamless for the users. Now, we also have a jurisdiction setting, if I can get my words out, and this is essentially just where you tell the service which jurisdictions you're interested in. Even if you only subscribe to the Caribbean core, you'll still be able to see cases from other jurisdictions. You'll still be able to see how different cases have cited one another, even if you don't subscribe to those cases. So coming in here to begin with to tell the service which jurisdictions you're particularly interested in is a great way to make sure that from the beginning the results are matching what you want them to be showing. So I'm going to get rid of the United Kingdom by unticking that box, and you can see I've got the Caribbean community ticked here. Now, if you were interested in particular areas of the Caribbean only, then if you click on this button, you can see there is a more in-depth breakdown. So you can choose particular islands as opposed to searching the Caribbean as a whole. But because we've got people from across the Caribbean listening in, I'm going to keep all of these different areas ticked. And I'm going to click out of that pane back onto the main pane so we can start doing some searching. Now, searching is a very complicated thing, and I've decided to split it into two main sections. So the first thing is when you know a case, and I know that some of you will be rolling your eyes thinking, oh, if you know a case, it's easy, you just type it in. And you're exactly right, because we try and make searching as easy as possible. So if you know the name of your case that you're searching, start typing it in, and Justice will start suggesting Grebe isn't a case. Now, it will help if you spell correctly, which for some of you won't be an issue, but for me, especially on a miserable Wednesday afternoon, seems to be more difficult than it normally is. So as I mentioned, as you start typing, it shows you any cases that match your search from the jurisdictions that you are interested in. So as I start typing green against the Minister of the Environment, you can see I've got two results here. One from the Court of Appeal of Bermuda and one from the Supreme Court of Bermuda. So more than likely the same case, the different appellate stages there. Now, if you know the citation of the case that you're interested in, again, just start typing it in. And the great thing about JustisOne, because we do search over all the different platforms, it doesn't really matter which citation you type in. So if a case is reported in the West Indies, even though at Justice we don't have the West Indies law reports, you can type the citation in of the West Indies law reports. It will still show you the case, and it will show you other versions of the case that you do have access to. So I've searched for a case in the Justice Jamaica cases, and you can see the top case is the result that I'm looking for, because underneath the court and the flag, I have a little notification to tell me that this case was reported in 2007 JJC 3104, which is the citation that I typed in. So what we're looking at now is a list of results. The other cases that we're seeing underneath are going to be cases that have cited this case. So they have come up in our results because the citation that I've searched for has been mentioned in those cases. But the case that we're interested in is the top result here. Now, when you look at this information, you can see the name of the case, the year. You get a few categories, which I'm going to discuss in just a second. You get the treatment information. So if this case has been cited by other cases, you'll get that information there. The court that the case was heard in, and if you click on that, you'll see the place that this case has been reported and the citation. Now, if a case has been reported in multiple places, let me just see if I can find an example for you. I'll find one later on. But if it has been reported in multiple places, you'll see all the different citations. And that comes back to what I was saying earlier. It doesn't matter if your case has been cited in multiple different law reports. It will still have one entry in JustisOne, and you'll be able to see all the different citations. Now, this blue icon tells you that the full text of this case is available on Justis. So there will be times when you're researching and you come across a case that doesn't have that blue icon. We can't see any on the screen at the moment, but they are on here. And that is essentially the cases that we've got the index for. So we've got information surrounding that case, but we don't hold the full text. And in those instances, you can see where that case is available online, and you can link through to it if either you have a subscription to the service that it's on, or if it's on a free resource, then of course everyone will be able to link through to it. But that blue icon will let you know before you click into the document whether we have the full text or not. So that is searching for a case when we already know it, which is probably the easiest type of research that I much prefer doing. Now I'm just going to clear the screen here and go back to the beginning, because I'm now going to talk about when you don't know the case. If you're just searching for an area of law, or if you've got a few facts, or if you remember a case that you were once told about in law school and you think, I can't remember what it was called, but I have a few random bits of information, that is where JustisOne comes into its own. And the reason for that, I will show you now. So I'm going to start and pretend that I'm interested in an area of law. Maybe I'm a student writing an essay. Maybe I'm a practitioner who has been asked to litigate on a particular topic that I haven't really done before. Or perhaps I just want to brush up my knowledge on a particular area of law. Whatever it may be, all I'm going to suggest is you type the name of that area of law into JustisOne. Now I've just typed property. You can see underneath in purple, I have a few different options. I've got property market, property's value, property's occupancy, property's occupation, property and conveyancing. So these are all different areas of law that JustisOne is suggesting I may be interested in. Now I'm going to click on property and conveyancing for the time being, and I'm going to show you what my results look like. So we've already seen what these results mean, but I'm going to give you a bit more information here. So you can see we've got a nice variation of different jurisdictions coming up in our results. And what we are looking at are the main cases from the Caribbean, from all the different jurisdictions that we've got selected for property and conveyancing. And the reason that I know that is because property and conveyancing has come up in purple. Property and conveyancing has come up as purple because it is a term from the taxonomy that we created when we created JustisOne. So as I mentioned, because we had so much content, the likes of which no other legal platform had ever handled before, we needed a really strong taxonomy to make sure that the information that we had was easily accessible to our users. Now, we looked at the taxonomies that were available at the time, and none of them really cut the mustard. So we had to create our own. And it's taken quite a long time. It's still an evolving process. And we have got the largest legal taxonomy that is working behind the scenes on JustisOne when you're doing your research. And what that means to you as a user is when you type in something like property and conveyancing, our results, so we've got nearly 3,000 cases in our list of results. Our results are all cases that have been classified as property and conveyancing cases by the taxonomy. So they're not cases that have a head note where a legal editor has said this is a property and conveyancing case, because although that works in some instances, there could be instances where an editor has left that area of law out, or it could be that the case was used for a different reason in the past and now it's used for property and conveyancing, which we've seen quite often in the law as it develops. Or it could be that it's a case that's unreported that doesn't have a head note, and then you're just looking at cases that mention property and conveyancing within the full text. And especially with areas of law, they could be so broad. I mean, property and conveyancing could be mentioned in a divorce case because they're discussing who gets to keep the house, whereas it's not really a property and conveyancing case in the traditional sense. So when we search for property and conveyancing on JustisOne, we're much more confident that the results that we're seeing are going to be what we expect to see and the best possible results, and we're not going to miss a case because it hasn't been reported when it could potentially be the exact case that we're looking for and the exact case that we're interested in. So I hope that makes sense. You can see we've got our list of results. They're ranked by the leading cases coming to the top of your search. So as I mentioned, if you were someone who was starting out in a completely new area of law, type it in. The top 5, top 10 results, however much time you have to do your research, are going to be the main cases for that area of law. So it's a great place to start. Now, all results will show me cases and legislation. Unfortunately, you can see that there's no legislation yet for the Caribbean. The legislation on JustisOne is for the UK, and we also have Irish legislation, but I'm going to talk about legislation a bit later on. So we're only looking at cases. You can change the relevancy of the ranking if you wanted to. So if you wanted to look at the most recent property and conveyancing cases, you can do that there. You'll also have an option for categories. So these are the top level terms from the taxonomy that I mentioned earlier. So these are all the sort of #1 terms that all the other terms spring off, like if you can imagine sort of an umbrella type system. So there are about 40 top level terms, and altogether in the whole taxonomy there's about 1.7 million terms, which is why I'm so I believe so strongly that you're much more likely to find what you're looking for using the service. Now, jurisdiction, at the moment we're looking at cases from the Caribbean. If I wanted to expand my my jurisdictions to all of the others, I can tick that button and instantly do so. Or if I click on show jurisdiction settings, it'll open up the panel that we were in previously, so you could amend the jurisdictions that you were looking at if you wanted to. And then finally, we also have a button for full text. So what that does is it only shows you results that we have the full text for on Justis, and it would remove any other cases from your list of results if that's what you wanted to do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to potentially make my search a little bit more complex, because obviously property and conveyancing is really broad. So I'm also interested in cases to do with compensations relating to the properties that I am researching. So people who are entitled to compensations. And what I'm particularly interested in is people who go into a property venture and shared intentions, and what shared intentions means. So I'm going to put shared intentions in quotation marks, and the reason that I'm putting it in quotation marks is because I don't want to get any cases that mention the word shared and the word intentions, because obviously they're words that could mean anything, and if they were in different parts of the document, they're not going to be relevant to my results. But by putting them in quotation marks, I'm telling the service I want the phrase shared intentions, these two words together in that order, and I don't want anything else. So when I click search, I get no results. There are no results found for property and conveyancing and compensations with shared intentions in quotation marks. And that's intentional before you think that I'm going crazy and that I haven't planned for this webinar whatsoever. And I will discuss that with you in a sec. The first thing I'm going to show you is that property and conveyancing and compensations, you can see here, they're both purple because they're both terms of the taxonomy. Shared intentions is not a term of the taxonomy, and therefore, whereas we are getting cases, well, we're not because we've got none, but in theory we'd be getting cases that were categorized as property and conveyancing cases and cases to do with compensations. Shared intentions, because it's not a term from the taxonomy, is being searched for in the full text. And we can see that very clearly if we click on the advanced search functionality within the main search bar. You can see that property and conveyancing and compensations are in the category field. Shared intentions is in the full text field. So the service is extremely clever. You may have noticed earlier when we searched for a citation, it was orange. When we searched for the title, it was blue. It does that automatically. It knows what you're searching for. So that, again, your results will be the best possible results that they can be. So I'm going to leave the advanced search, which I should mention as an aside, if you do have bits of information, you have a year, date, you know it roughly happened in the 1990s, that sort of thing, come into the advanced search, put the information that you have in the relevant boxes. If you're just searching for general areas of law and pieces of information within the full text, then the quick search is going to be adequate for you because it knows what you mean by that information. So I'm going to leave this area just by clicking back onto the main search page. Not by clicking the X, there you go, I don't even know my own service. So clicking the X and we go back to our results, which we know we have none of. So what I'm going to do is, it says here there's no results found for your search. You may want to expand your search to all jurisdictions. So this is an option that it will always give you if you get no results. So if you're particularly searching for an area of law in your jurisdiction on your island and you don't get any results for what you're looking for, it will always give you the option to expand search to all jurisdictions, because it may be that the facts that you're looking for don't relate to any cases within your jurisdiction, but it could relate to cases from other jurisdictions that you can use for your research. So I've expanded it to all jurisdictions, and I have one result. I have the case of Stack and Dowden, and that is the case that I'm going to be showing you for the rest of the webinar. Now, we looked earlier at the Jamaican case. It had only been cited in one place. So just to give you an idea of how the different parallel citations work, if I click on House of Lords, you can see, firstly, we've got the judgment citation, and then you can see all the different places where this case has been reported and all of the different parallel citations for this case. So this case has been cited in 9-10 different places, and that's what I mean by the duplication. If you're using multiple services, there's a lot of overlap between these cases. But if you search on JustisOne, it doesn't matter whether you search for the law report citation, whether you use the All England report citation, whether you use a citation you've never even heard of, like the ITELRs, and you think, what on earth is that? You don't have to find out what it means. Just type it into JustisOne. It will still bring you to this page, and you'll say, okay, Stack and Dowden. That's much more easy to understand. You don't have to know which publishers have which citations. It makes life a lot easier. So I've come into a case at last, and apologies if I am going through this too quickly. I have so much to show you, and I do tend to let my mouth run away with me slightly. So I'm hoping that it's not too much of an issue and you're all keeping up with me just fine. I'm just going to quickly check and see if there are any questions that have come in so far. It's one that I'm going to respond to a bit later on. So we'll carry on with the demonstration at this stage. So we search for cases to do with property and conveyancing and compensations. Now, the screen is split into two, so you'll notice that it's quite clear. Now, the left-hand side of the screen, for those of you who are familiar with JustCite, the left-hand side of the screen is all of the case analysis, it's all of the surrounding information, the metadata, anything about the case. And the right-hand side of the screen is the case itself. So if I'd found this case using JustisOne and all I wanted to do was read it, then I have the full text here that I can read to my heart's content. I would actually recommend you use the read mode. And so if I click on that button, you can see that the judgment comes into the center of my screen and it gets rid of all of the distractions around me, so you can just read the judgment quite nicely. You can obviously download the case as well if you wanted to here. Now, because we searched for shared intentions in the full text, that's what I'm particularly interested in. If I come and look at the judgment, you'll notice there's a little pen icon. What that pen icon will do is it'll show you where in the full text the information that you've searched for can be found. So any references to property or compensations or shared intentions, you can see all the different mentions here. So it just means that it's much quicker if you've searched for a particular area of law to find that in context. I'm just going to turn that off. Now, as well as the judgment, this case has been reported in the Times Law Reports. Now, the Times Law Reports are one of the bolt-ons that we offer at Justis. So if you subscribe to the Times Law Reports, you'll also see the Stack and Dowden case and the reported version here on this second tab. Now, if you don't subscribe to the Times Law Reports, you'll still see the tab, but it'll say you don't subscribe to this. So we're not hiding any information from you, so you'll know exactly where you stand. Now, the third tab that you have here is Citations and Sources. So these are all of the different parallel citations for Stack and Dowden and where they are found online. So as I mentioned earlier, when you search Justis, you're searching across 100 different publishers, and you can see some of them here. There's, of course, Justis, there's Bailey, there's Westlaw, there's Lexis. Now, if you subscribe to these services, then all you need to do is click on any of these links. So Westlaw has so many different platforms, so we need a different link for each one. But if you subscribe to any of these services, then you can link directly to that content from JustisOne. So you don't need to run separate searches and you know, duplicate your work. But if you find a case on JustisOne that we don't have the full text for, it's very quick and easy to see where that text can be found. So you're not going to get a screen that just says no results found, which can be extremely frustrating because often you don't know if no results have been found because the search was something wrong with the search, or whether it's on a different platform, or whether it even exists to begin with. So we take all that frustration out. You can link from JustisOne directly to 100 different publishers. And as I mentioned, if it is available somewhere online for free, then we have many of those services that you can link to. So Bailey is a free service in the UK, so anyone at all who's using JustisOne can click on that link. It takes you directly to Bailey's website, to the Stack and Dowden case. So if it is available for free, we will point you in the right direction. So that is how you would use JustisOne to find a case and read the full text, whether it's reading the full text on our platform or going on to a different service and reading the full text elsewhere. However, we don't want you to go straight off somewhere else. We don't want you to just go straight in and read the text. Obviously, if you're familiar with the area of law and with the cases, then you have our blessing. But we want you to spend a bit more time on JustisOne ideally. And the reason we want you to spend more time is to find out if that case is good law, if it's current law, if it's worth your time in the first place, and other surrounding information that can make your life so much easier. Now, the first thing that I'm going to show you are the cited cases. So these are the cases that Stack and Dowden looked at within its own judgment. Now you can see at the top of the screen, it says it's showing us 61 of a possible 68 cited cases based on jurisdiction. So essentially, because of our jurisdiction filters, because we said we're only interested in the Caribbean, it's only showing us cases from within Stack's own jurisdiction, so from the UK and Caribbean. It's not going to show us any other jurisdictions. So we could be missing out on content, and that is the reason that bar is coming up. So if I click on show all jurisdictions, it will update the list so that we can see all of the cases that Stack and Dowden has discussed, which obviously is much more conducive to productive research. It may be that later on down the line we decide that a case from Singapore is really not relevant to us, but at least you have that knowledge, and knowledge is power. So the list of the citing cases, you can see them here. The first one is a positive treatment, and that's green. We then have a couple of negative treatments, which are red, and then any neutral treatments are orange. So it's a color-coded system, very simple, red bad, green good. And this information is all compiled by our editorial team. So we're actually one of the only publishers that has a team of legally trained editors that read all the cases and mark up this information. So it's not just a computer that scanned a document and picked out all the citations. It's actually a legally trained human brain that is putting all this information together. And if you want to know exactly what we mean when we say approved or applied, considered or cited, then just hover over the text and you can see there a little explanation comes up to tell you exactly what we mean. And that's not because we doubt your legal knowledge in any way. It's because that different publishers, different jurisdictions can use different terminology in different ways, and we don't want there to be any confusion as to what we mean. So in looking at this list, we can see that Stack and Dowden approved Oxley and Hiscox. So if I'm interested in Stack, stands to reason that I'm going to be interested in Oxley and Hiscox because Stack has approved it, which is a very strong positive treatment. Now, if I want to find out more about how Stack has approved Oxley, I can click on this link because this link is telling me that there are 11 references to Oxley and Hiscox in Stack and Dowden, and if I click on that link, it will automatically highlight all the references to Oxley and Hiscox within Stack, so I can see them in context. And this is particularly important, A, to save some time, so I don't have to read through the judgment to find these references myself. They're automatically highlighted, and I can use this yellow bar to scroll through them nicely. But it also means that if Stack and Dowden is discussing multiple points of law within its judgment, which often happens, especially in cases like Stack, which is extremely lengthy and complicated, it could be discussing multiple points of law, and potentially I'm only interested in one of those points of law. So the fact that Stack has approved Oxley is great, but if it's approved Oxley based on a completely different point of law besides the one that I'm interested in, I don't want to spend too much time looking into this relationship. I don't want to have to go and read Oxley and read Stack to get that information. So just by clicking on that link, and you can click on multiple if you wanted to have a look at multiple within the text, it just saves you a huge amount of time and make sure that you're focusing your research in the most productive places. So I'm going to close that down. They're the cited cases, the cases that Stack and Dowden has looked at. We then have cited legislation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we do have legislation from the UK. We have the whole legislative history, actually, in fact, all the way back to 1235. And for any history buffs out there, our case law goes back to 1163. So if you did want to read any crazy old cases, I mean, the trials of Anne Boleyn and Guy Fawkes, you can find those on JustisOne. So the cited legislation, again, is done by our editors. So if there's any legislation that's actually been substantively discussed within the judgment, we will pull that out and tell you about it. Again, it's done by our editors. And what that means is they're not just picking out every single piece of legislation that's mentioned in passing, because if we did that, you'd have a much longer list and it would take you a long time to trail through it and it wouldn't be relevant. So we've shown you there's one piece of legislation that's really discussed in Stack and Dowden, so you can see that there. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is arguably the most important. So these are the citing cases. So since Stack went to court, these are the cases that have referred to Stack. And obviously, in a common law system, these are the ones that determine whether Stack is still considered good law or not. Now again, we're seeing our bar to say that we're not seeing all cases based on jurisdictions. If that starts annoying you, just go into your jurisdiction settings and turn them all on. But you can obviously just click show all jurisdictions and that will update them automatically. And you can see now we can see cases from Hong Kong and from Singapore and Ireland that we couldn't see before. So there could be potentially a really strong negative treatment that is from a jurisdiction that isn't binding in yours. But obviously, it's going to be persuasive and it's going to be of interest to you if you're planning on using a case in an argument to know that it has been negatively treated in another common law jurisdiction. And that's one of the beauties of the fact that we search across so many different jurisdictions and so much content. Now, if you're interested in a particular jurisdiction, then we have a filter field here. So if you're looking at Stack and Dowden and thinking, well, this is all well and good, but is this actually going to be relevant to me? All you need to do is type in the jurisdiction that you're interested in, and it will update. So if you want to know, just spelling is not my strong point today, so excuse me. If this case has been cited in the Privy Council before, type in, well, I only needed to go to Privy, and you can see that Stack and Dowden has actually been applied in 2 cases in the Privy Council, one from the Bahamas, and Abbott, which doesn't say where it's from, but if you clicked on it, you would get that information. Or, you know, any jurisdiction that you're in, you could type in that information. Oh, it's just the Bahamas one again. Probably should have been more adventurous in my typing, but you get the point. If you're in a particular jurisdiction and you want to know if a case has been heard in that jurisdiction before, then the best way to find that out is just to type it in. Now, with our cited cases, we had a list. You could see the references to those cases within the text. And we've done the same thing here with our citing cases. Now, obviously, we can only show you full text if we have it ourselves due to copyright. Other publishers are not so keen on us letting you see content from their own services. So if we have it, we can show you that information. So I can see that Stack and Dowden has been distinguished in a number of cases, and 2 from the UK and 1 from Ireland. We can actually show you the exact reference to Stack and Dowden in those judgments. So I can see that Lasker and Lascar has referred to Stack 4 times, Barcham 13 times, and the Irish case once. So process of elimination, I'm going to go to the one that's mentioned Stack the most, which is the Barcham case. And if I click on that link, it automatically opens the Barcham case, and it is highlighted all 13 references to Stack and Dowden within the text. So again, I can see in context why Stack has been discussed, why it's been distinguished, whether that's going to have any impact on my research. You can also see that we have two cases side by side here, which is a really nice feature on JustisOne, and it just means that you are able to research in a much more natural way. If there are multiple cases that you're interested in, if I wanted to open Lascar and Lascar as well, you can see multiple cases side by side, and this will depend on the resolution of your computer. The better the resolution, the more cases you'll be able to see. Now you'll note that Stack and Dowden, we're looking at the analysis of the case, which when we were looking at one case on its own was the left-hand side. And for Bartram and Lascar, we're looking at the full text. You can change this information. So if I wanted to look at the full text of Stack as well, simple as clicking full text. If I wanted to change back to the analysis, click on analysis, and you can see that button is available there for all of these cases. Now, if I want to have multiple cases open, but I only want to have a look at one at once, I'm going to click Stack and Dowden, which means I've selected it. And then if I click on single view, you can see that I'm again only looking at Stack and Dowden. But that doesn't mean that I'm no longer interested in the other cases. I still am, and they're still available on my screen. So if I show you, there's a button here that if I click, it allows me to flip between the different cases that I've got open. So if you're researching a point of law and there's a couple of pieces of legislation and a few cases that are relevant, you don't have to look at things in isolation or have multiple browsers open or multiple cases open on different tabs, which can just get confusing. You can have as many things as you want open in JustisOne. And if I click on all open documents, I can see the cases that I do have open, and I can use this to flip between them as well if I want to go back to any particular document. To close a case, you just need to click on that X, and it has now got rid of that. And you can see the option for multiple view has now disappeared because I've only got one case open. So hopefully that all makes sense. The last thing that I'm going to show you here in the analysis pane are the categories. So as I mentioned earlier, every single case has been categorized by our taxonomy, and these are the different categories that Stack and Dowden has been assigned. So it's probably a really good place to come when you start looking at a case, because this will give you a really good overview of all the different themes of the case, and you'll get a better understanding of whether this case is relevant to you or not. And we mentioned earlier, if you are looking at an area of law for the first time, click on any of these and you will get a good bit of information about each one. So you'll get the leading cases and the recent cases for that area of law. So we're looking at mortgages. Our jurisdiction settings are only interested in the Caribbean, so I'm only seeing Caribbean cases. Again, if my jurisdiction settings were changed, I would see these cases would be a reflection of that. But as it stands, the recent cases I have here from Jamaica, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Cayman, Bermuda, all these different jurisdictions are represented. So if you wanted to see the recent cases or the leading cases for any area of law, you can just click on any category within the service to do that. Now there's two last things that I'm going to show you in the last 10 minutes before I let you all go and get on with your day. So the first thing is the Precedent Map. Now some of you may have seen the Precedent Map already. For those of you who are familiar with JustCite, you'll be familiar with the concept of the Precedent Map. However, it has had a makeover. So what we're looking at is the Precedent Map for Stack and Dowden. And you can see at the top here, just underneath the name of the case, and by the way, you can click on that, that's a link, it will just take you back through to the case on JustisOne. We're currently seeing the positive, the neutral, and the, we're just seeing the positive and the negative cases surrounding Stack and Dowden. Because it's a case that's been so heavily cited in court, if I clicked on the neutral, I do have the option, but if I clicked on it, it would be extremely cluttered and I wouldn't be able to make heads or tail of the Precedent Map. So we give you the option, but for a case this big, we're going to focus on the positive and negative cases because ordinarily they're what we're interested in any regard. So I'll show you exactly what we're looking at. So the large white circle in the center of your screen is our case, is Stack and Dowden. It's what we've been looking at. In the center are the cases that Stack and Dowden has cited. So the cases that Stack and Dowden has cited itself, and the color coding is all the same. So there's two cases here that Stack and Dowden has given negative treatments to, and two cases that have positive treatments. Now on the outside of the precedent map, these are the cases along the outside. These are the cases that have subsequently referred to Stack and Dowden. So these are the ones that have referred to Stack. And these cases are all in chronological order. So the first case here that's referred to Stack and Dowden is Holman and Howes from 2007. And then the most recent case that has referred to Stack is Ma and Colley from 2017, so a Bahamas case. So firstly, when you open up a precedent map, this most recent case on the bottom right-hand side of your screen is always the most recent case to have cited Stack. So in this instance, it's been cited this year, so you know the case is current law. If you opened up a precedent map and it hadn't been used in 10, 15, 20 years, then that would send alarm bells ringing. You think, right, okay, why are people not referring to this case and what are they referring to instead? Also, because the cases are in chronological order, it puts the different treatments into context. So if you remember when we opened up our list of cases that had cited Stack, we had quite a few negative treatments at the top. And if you were relatively new to legal research or a student, or if you were just someone working on a really important case and you didn't want to get anything wrong, you might look at all those negative treatments and think, is it worth the risk? Shall I include this case because it does have all these negative treatments and it might turn around and bite me in the bum? Excuse my language. Hopefully none of you are offended by the word bum, and I've just said it again, so I'm going to stop. But anyway, what my point that I'm making is you can see these cases in context. So you can see that even though these negative cases that have cited Stack do exist, since those, it has been cited positively. So even though it has had these negative treatments since the most recent negative treatment in 2014, it has had two positive treatments. And that would sort of put your mind at ease, because you know, even though it's had negative treatments, the most recent treatment that it's had is a positive one. And since the negative treatments, it's actually had a couple of positive ones. Whereas if you opened a precedent map and the most recent treatments were all negative, then that would send alarm bells ringing and you'd think, right, I'm not going to touch this case with a 10-foot barge pole. The second thing the precedent map can do is, if you notice, the sizes of all the circles are different. Essentially, if I click on one of these smaller circles, I know that this case has cited Stack. That's the whole reason it's in the precedent map. But it doesn't have any other relationship to any other case within the map. There's no other lines there. Whereas by comparison, if I click on Oxley and Hiscock, I can see that a number of the cases that are related to Stack are also related to Oxley and Hiscock. So if I'm prioritizing my reading, Oxley and Hiscock is going to be more important to me than this case. So it allows you to pick out the larger circles, and they're going to be the ones that are more related to your line of inquiry than others. So if you've found Stack and you think, right, this is useful, come into the precedent map and it'll hopefully point you in the right direction of the next place to go for your research. So I'm going to shut down the precedent map now, because I do have one last thing to show you extremely quickly, and that is this pink paragraph here on the left-hand side of my screen. And I really am saving the best till last. So because we have, and I sound like a parrot, I've bleated on about this so much, because we have so much content, we scanned it all, and obviously we've got our editors who pick out the relationships, but what we also looked at is which parts of a case are most commonly cited. And we found that some of these judgments, which are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and are always, always, always cited in court, are always cited for the same reason. And it could be any reason. It could be that the judge has explained a piece of terminology that's never been explained before. It could be a huge groundbreaking decision that will change the course of an area of law forever. It could be anything, but it's usually something why the big important cases are the big important cases. And in Stack and Dowden, it is this sentence: the search is to ascertain the parties' shared intentions. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of why I searched for shared intentions and why this case is so important, because this actually is the whole point of the Stack and Dowden case. And I know that by reading this pink paragraph. Before I delve into the full text, which is hundreds of pages long, I know that when most people go to court and cite Stack and Dowden, this is the most important part of Stack and Dowden that they're referring to. Now, if I click on it, it'll highlight this section of the text so I can see it within context. This is the most important part of this case. So any case that you're looking at on JustisOne, you'll automatically know what the most important part is. And more than that, if you click on highlight all quoted passages, it'll show you a heat map. You can see down the scroll bar, I now have a heat map. Every single part of the judgment that has been cited in another judgment has been highlighted. So firstly, this is really important or really useful if I'm skim reading this case, because it's automatically going to draw my eye to the most important parts of the text that have been cited elsewhere. But more than that, if I'm doing my research and I find an important case and I turn this on, and as I'm reading I come across a sentence and I think, that is what I've been looking for, that is exactly the point I'm trying to make. If it's been used elsewhere, you will know about it, and that section will be highlighted. The darker the color of the highlight, the more frequently that section of the text has been used in other cases. And if you click on that section of the text, it will tell you where this case has been used. So this sentence that I've just clicked on, if I thought this is really important, I can click on it and I can see that it's also been cited in Jones and Kernot at paragraph 16, and I can click on that link to see this section of Stack in Jones and Kernot. Now the darker section, if I click on that, you can see how many cases have referred to this section of Stack and Dowden. Absolutely loads. But it is super important because this information you would never be able to garner any other way. Even if you read all of these cases and you cross-reference them meticulously, which would probably take you days, it would be very difficult to go through to this level of detail and find these supporting cases for your arguments so quickly. So hopefully going forward you'll all use JustisOne, and this feature will be particularly useful to you and your research, because I know from personal experience and having spoken to other practitioners, it's a really, really useful service, in particular to anyone doing legal research or anyone involved in litigation, because you can automatically find multiple sources to back up your argument. Now that's everything that I have to show you this morning. I mean, if you're using the service and you have any questions, there's also an information button here at the top right hand side. So you can click that at any stage and it'll show you exactly what you're looking at on the screen. But also please don't be a stranger. Contact us at Justis if you have any questions. In particular, if you have any questions following on from this webinar, you should all have my contact details from the email. So contact us if you have any questions or queries, because we do always love to hear from our customers, and feedback is always important because it's the feedback that drives us, and we create these features around you. So if you think this is useful but it would be really useful if it did that, let us know. You never know, we're a small company and we act quickly. So I'm going to ask you one last question before you go. So hopefully the answer to this will be yes. Please be honest. If for any reason it's not, then let me know, because again, we really do appreciate your feedback. But I've really enjoyed this session. I hope that you have too, and I hope that going forward you really do enjoy using the service and you get a lot out of it. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope it's much sunnier where you are than where I am. And if you need anything at all going forward, then we look forward to hearing from you. Okay, well, thank you very much. That's the end of this webinar. If you'd like to book a training session for your organization which would be customizable to your exact subscription, and we can do it at a time that suits you, then contact us. It's training@justis.com, and we would be more than happy to help. But either way, have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye.